Welcome. You are tuned into another episode of Community Chat. My name is Kevin Tocci. I will be your host for this particular episode of Community Chat. What is Community Chat about? Well, the idea is for us to be able to have conversations about things that are going on with stakeholders, community leaders, regular folks who are doing things. Maybe they might have an event that's coming up. We'll have a chat with them. And from time to time, we'll even have guest hosts. If you want to be a guest host, info@abingtoncamp.tv. And if we can find someone for you to interview, well, maybe you could be part of the rotation of guest hosts that we have. Today, we are privileged to be speaking with State Representative John Keenan as he represents the Norfolk and Plymouth District. Senator, welcome back to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Just so folks know, we are fortunate that over the past few years that the senator on a regular basis is in, as is Representative Allison Sullivan Almeida. The folks who represented this great town are willing to come in and kind of talk about some of the things that they're doing. How were your holidays? I know we're kind of going back a bit, but you got through the holidays and
got through the holidays into the new year, and everything is just flying by.
Yeah, and you are embarking on your 8th term,
which is I just can't believe. It has gone by so quickly, and other times it seems like it takes a little while to get things done, but it goes by quickly, and I've enjoyed it. So. That's been great.
When you look back over the past 14 years, what are some of the things that you were proud of, some of the things that you've accomplished, or some of the legislation that you've either championed or that you have been in on co-sponsoring?
Probably most proud of the work done in the behavioral health field, substance use and mental health. When I first went to the state Senate, I was appointed the Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Mental Health and Substance Use. And it was something that I didn't know an awful lot about. The Senate President at the time, Terry Murray, said, I know you probably thought you'd end up on a financial committee, but I think this will be impactful, it will change your life. And it really did. And it was right at the time where the opioid epidemic was just taking off. And so we were able to do some things pretty quickly in terms of improving our prescription monitoring program, which is now MassPat, requiring physicians to check that system before prescribing opioids. We did a whole host of things that focused on what at that point was driving the opioid epidemic, which was the overprescription of medications, particularly OxyContin. And so we put a lot of things in place, and with time we saw the number of prescriptions being written drop by about 60%. The opioid epidemic looks different now because fentanyl came in. Right as we were seeing the numbers of overdose deaths trend down, COVID hit, fentanyl hit, those numbers spiked up again, and we're finally seeing those numbers turn a little bit and start to come down. And that's because of the programming that we put in place, the data that we're collecting, the policy that we're implementing. So as I look back, that's something I'm proud of, and I continue to do work in that area, and hopefully it will be impactful.
As you begin the new term, what are some of your legislative priorities? I know that just a few weeks ago, you and your colleagues, whether it's the folks who are in the Senate or in the House, you had a relatively small window to file. Now, those who are new to the legislature had, this much time to be able to get their bills in. What would you say are some of your priorities when it comes to legislation?
Probably the priorities in legislation generally are always what can we do in the budget for the local communities, make sure that the education funding is as high as we can possibly get it, make sure that what they call unrestricted general government aid, which towns rely on for police and fire and veterans programming, making sure that that's high as we can get it. And we've been successful, both those accounts are at record highs, so that's good to see, and we'll continue to work on that. Even as our revenue picture changes a little bit, we'll work on that. The kind of piece of legislation that we filed that we're most excited about in terms of trying to have it be impactful is we're calling it the Better Health Act, BETTOR, the Better Health Act. And it's focused on the sports betting situation, which is just exploding. And all across the Commonwealth, we are starting to see the issue of problem and addictive gambling surface, We now have organizations, behavioral health organizations, that are offering recovery groups because they're seeing the number of people who are struggling with addictions to gambling, prompted most recently by sports betting, increase. And so we have a bill that's going to hopefully address some of those issues.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I'm a big fan of sports radio, knowing that there's 2 of them here in the Boston area. And you have hosts who talk about doing prop bets and how to do that. I feel as though, as consumers, since the sports betting, has went from being a bill to becoming a law, we are bombarded with the different ways, the different ways that we can bet our money, and if you get in now, we'll give you X amount of money. It's almost like someone who gets it with drugs. Same thing. You get a sample of it. Says, "Hey, we'll give this to you for free." Once you get a taste of it, depending on your DNA and addiction, you could be hooked for life.
And that's the plan. They look obviously to appeal to as many people as possible, but they know within that group that they appeal to that there are people that are prone to bet more, and they target them. That's my belief, is that they go out and they target them. And the numbers show from studies that have been done in Connecticut and New Jersey that the industry makes the most money off of those people who bet the most. Makes sense. So they make their money off of people who struggle with problem gambling or gambling addiction. That's where they make most of their money. They don't make it off the casual once a month bettor. They make it off the person who every single day is betting in some form. And the real concern is, as we deal with sports betting, on the horizon is online casino betting. Sports betting, you have to, sports, it depends on whether Jason Tatum has a good night, how the Celtics do, how they hit their 3-pointers. There's always a human element as to the outcome of the game and therefore the outcome of your bet. When you do online casino, the house completely controls the odds. And they come out with these incredibly addictive games. And people have described it, the experts have described it, that it's like crack cocaine in some ways. It is so addictive, so instantaneous, and it's looming. And so we hope that by addressing sports betting, it'll get people aware of what's going on there, and then also more aware of what may be coming.
But as far as refiles, I'm sure that anytime you file a bill, it's not guaranteed that it's going to get through to the point where it's going to be signed into law. It might be bundled in with another piece of legislation. Anything that you've refiled, or maybe you might even have some bipartisan efforts that you've worked on that are also part of a refile.
Yeah, we continue to work on the behavioral health field. We're starting to hear again about insurance companies turning people down for substance use treatment. And so we worked in the Senate and then in the House, and it passed and became law several years ago, a bill that requires insurance companies to provide up to 15 days of coverage for substance use treatment. We're trying to get that requirement up to 30 days. Some of them provide it, Mass Health provides it, but not all the insurance companies do. And it's a real struggle for people who are receiving treatment to make sure that treatment can continue. At 15 days, an insurance company may say, we're not going to provide any more coverage. The clinician, the provider may say, how about another 3 days? And that may be covered. And then the person is released from treatment. The insurance companies will say, well, that 15 days doesn't work because they end up again in detox and coming back into the system. And what our argument and the numbers show is that's because they need 30 days of treatment. You're using the 15 days as an excuse not to extend it to 30 because they're cycling out and coming back. 30 is generally what's considered kind of routine or required treatment before you enter into more sustained recovery. And so we've refiled that bill. We're hopeful that will move. We refiled the drug stewardship bill, a whole host of bills that we refile, because overall there's sometimes 7,000 bills filed, and so the chances of bills passing is pretty slim, so you just keep filing and keep working on them.
What do you feel are the key issues that this legislature is going to have to focus on over the 2 years? I think a lot of people are concerned with the housing crisis. I think a lot of people are also keeping an eye on the migrant situation. And I think the MBTA Communities Act is also something that those who are in adjacent communities, when it comes to the commuter rail, are saying, why do we have to be a part of this?
They're all tied together. So this morning, actually, I was responding to an email that I got from a person saying, please don't support the governor's supplemental budget proposal of $425 million, that we've done enough for the migrants, we can't sustain this.
Yeah.
It is difficult to sustain that kind of spending on the emergency assistance program. But what we're finding is now people who are applying to enter the program, 65% of them are Massachusetts residents. They've lost their housing because of domestic violence, a family member has turned them out, or they live in a building, two-family, a multi-unit or a large multi-unit that has been purchased and the new owner wants to convert it to condominiums, or the new owner is raising rents dramatically. And so those folks find themselves with nowhere to go, and they turn to our emergency assistance shelter program. And so 65% of those now applying are Massachusetts residents. And so why are Massachusetts residents applying? They've been removed from their housing or evicted because rents have gone up so high, and they can't find housing because we don't have enough housing. And they may need between $6,000 and $10,000 to get into an apartment. And these are working families. A working mother with a child trying to get a roof over their head needs $6,000 to $10,000 to get an apartment because we don't have enough. And so housing is a critical need in Massachusetts. The governor made an announcement yesterday of trying to produce 22,000 units a year, 220,000 over the next 10 years. And then you tie that into the MBTA Communities Act, where the idea is to allow zoning around these transportation hubs that would promote multifamily housing, and with the idea that, again, we desperately need it. Every town is facing a housing shortage. We've got to build more. And until we do, we're going to continue to have this need for our emergency assistance program, a need for the Massachusetts residents entering, and then we have the migrants that have come and kind of overwhelmed the system. Those numbers are dropping. Over the last year, we've seen them drop. The hotel in Rockland that's been used, that will no longer be a shelter. People have been moved out of it, will be moved out of there basically. So we're shutting down those hotels and motels. That part of the system is settling down, and I suspect that those numbers will continue to decline, meaning the number of people coming to Massachusetts seeking assistance because they're migrants.
I know that when the supplemental, the $425 million supplemental budget was voted on, that there was a group of legislators who were pushing and calling for a modification or amendment to the Right to Shelter Act. What are your thoughts on that? Does that need? I mean, I think it's a piece of legislation it's 40 years old, and like anything, probably could use an update. Do you think it's something that is on the horizon?
I think it deserves a very good look. It's 40 years old. Things have changed. The people who are looking for housing now are looking for housing for a lot of different reasons than they were 40 years ago. Is the EA system the best way to provide housing? It was set up basically for women with children, and that still is occurring. As I mentioned, domestic violence or just people being kicked out of homes, that's still occurring, or single mothers with children not being able to afford rent, single fathers, same thing. That's occurring. So I think it is time to take a good look at it. I'm a little hesitant to take a hatchet to it right now because, again, we have so many residents in need that while the concerns have been driven by the migrant population coming to the system, again, that's settling down. I don't want to turn away Massachusetts residents at a 6-month mark where they still haven't been able to find housing and just say, sorry, you're done. Or, hey, you have to prove you've lived in Massachusetts for 3 or 6 months before. And somebody may be struggling to get an ID because when they were, if it's domestic violence, they may have lost their IDs or they may have been taken from them by an abusive partner. So there's just so many different types of cases. So my sense is, let's get through the next few months with this appropriation as we prepare our budget for fiscal 2026, learn what's going on, get a better sense of the numbers, and then get through 2026 as we address the migrant issue. And while doing that, take a look at the EA system and say, what can we do to improve this? How can we make it more responsive? How can we make it more cost effective? How can we make it less costly? And all those things.
So just shifting from talking about a supplemental budget, which is usually when there's monies you gain more than the benchmark was set for that month, and you find a way to kind of spend that money. The revenue that's brought in, the Healy Driscoll administration has put forth their fiscal 2026 budget. This is a budget that's $62 billion, billion with a B. give your thoughts. I believe the fiscal 25, which we're in now, was what, 56, 57?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and figure it out.
But we've seen a bit of a jump here.
It is a bit of a jump. And part of that is due to inflation. So whether it's the health care we provide, the interest that we pay on some of our short-term notes is impactful. All the programs, the food programs that we cover, those all go up. The costs have all gone up. You know, we know what happened with the cost of food. So
eggs.
The budget reflects that. Eggs. I went and bought a dozen eggs the other day, and
astounding.
It was astounding. I've got a son who really likes to fry up his eggs and have an egg sandwich. I'm trying to get him to transition to something else, my youngest son. But it is. So all those things, all those costs are reflected in the increase in the state budget. Our revenue projection is that we will get about 2.2% in revenue increase over last year.
Okay.
And so that's going to kind of factor into ultimately what the House and Senate budgets look like. The governor's budget recognizes that costs have gone up, recognizes, for instance, that the needs of local communities have increased, and so the local aid amounts do go up, whether it's for Chapter 70, as we said, with schools, or the unrestricted. So we see all those things in there. The process now is her budget's been introduced. We've looked at it to get some sense of what our priorities are. The House budget will come out in April, and then the Senate budget will come out in May. To the extent that there's a difference between the House budget and the Senate budget, it'll go to conference committee. Hopefully this year we'll get it passed by June 30th. That has not happened in a while, but my hope is that it will happen this year. So it's a bit of a process. Our revenues are okay, and that's what drives what we can invest in, but it's a lot of uncertainty. We just don't know what's going to happen with federal money, and federal money that supports programs that we also support at the state level. And so that's the big unknown.
Does it concern you as a legislator, knowing that we've had the change of administration down in our nation's capital? We've gone from the Biden administration, which had a friendly rapport with our current administration, the Healy Driscoll administration, to where now maybe there might be a little bit of an adversarial, again, you have a new president in Donald Trump, who is, kind of already making his mark early on in the first month. Give your thoughts as concerns as a legislator when it comes to our Commonwealth.
I do have concerns, and mostly it's around the finances. There's a partnership that exists between the federal government and state governments, where there's all kinds of grants that come from the federal government. They have to be matched with state funds. In fact, here in Massachusetts, we leveraged our stabilization account, our rainy day account, which is at a record level. We've leveraged that and the interest earned on it to make us competitive on federal grants. Now, whether Massachusetts will still have access to those federal grants, even with our matching money, remains to be seen. You look at the Department of Transportation, there's concern whether we'll be able to do both bridges that go over the Cape Cod Canal. Yeah. And then there was just an announcement by the Secretary of Transportation that the Department of Transportation will focus its resources on communities that basically have higher birth rates and marriage rates. That was just announced last week. And so, when you look at, I don't know where our communities are in my district in terms of marriage rates and birth rates and how they compare, but it's a real interesting twist on transportation funding. And so that just highlights there's so much unknown, and it is concerning.
Going back to the governor's budget, are there any specific budget items that stand out that are going to be particularly beneficial or maybe concerning when it comes to the communities that you serve, Quincy, Abington, Braintree, Hanover, Holbrook, and Rockland?
No, as I say, we focus on local aid. Abington, under the governor's proposal, will see an increase in both Chapter 70 local aid and unrestricted. That's the governor's version. Generally, the House and the Senate track pretty closely because that's kind of agreed upon in advance, although on occasion we have gone higher with local aid. So we'll push for that. Other than that, the budget is kind of status quo. There's not a whole lot of new initiatives, and they're not necessarily dramatically cutting a lot of things. It's kind of a maintenance budget would be my view of it. And so we'll take a good look at it. Locally, it comes back to the local aid, Chapter 90 money, which helps with roads. And then we always try in the budget process to get some local priorities funded, and we were successful in last year's budget in getting some money for some fields and for the police department for a vehicle and a drone. Not real big buckets of money, but earmarks, local priorities that can make a difference. I'm not sure whether we'll have that opportunity again this year, but those are the types of things that we'll work on as we go through the budget process. In fact, we met with a sergeant over the police department just last week to talk about police department priorities, and we will be in regular contact with the school department and other town departments as well through the town manager.
As your towns, and of course Quincy, are trying to figure out what's going to happen when it comes to their budgets, what are you hearing from them? Do you hear the usual conversations at this time of year as to, do you have numbers? Do you know if there's anything you can do to help us additionally?
We do hear all the time. Scott will call us from Abington. We'll hear from Doug over in Rockland. We'll hear from Mayor Koch in Quincy and Mayor Joyce in Braintree. We're pretty regular contact. We just had a meeting relative to Braintree for the school funding. So yes, they express to us that they really need additional local aid money, and if it's not going to come through those Chapter 70 and unrestricted government aid, can it come through some other way? And so the governor has introduced a Municipal Empowerment Act, which would give a local option to communities to raise a hotel motel tax, to do something more on a local meals tax, and to do something on excise tax, which is collected locally. And then also to give them some ability to be more efficient in how they procure goods and services contractually. So that package is out there. The town officials are weighing in that they support that. We're hearing from some taxpayers, please don't do that, because the town would end up being a tax on us. But we're really trying to balance the needs of the communities with a recognition that ultimately taxpayers pay, whether it's at the state level or the local level.
There was also a rumor that there might even be a candy tax, or some kind of something that would be levied against candy. Now, knowing that's a food and food is not taxed, that would be an intriguing type of thing to be part of a budget proposal.
Yes, so the governor's proposed that. I don't know what the revenue projections are on it. I don't think they're substantial. And usually on something like that, it's two-pronged. One is it raises revenue, and then the other is that it should, generally when you raise a tax, consumption drops. And that is whether it's gas, tobacco, alcohol. So the governor's view on it is that it will raise some revenue, and it also decrease the sales of sugary candy products. Okay. I hope they don't touch dark chocolate, and I hope they leave chocolate chip cookies alone, although I've been doing better on the chocolate chip cookie front.
Anything that you want to make sure you touch upon in regards to things that your office is doing, things you're doing with constituents, or even just things that you've attended around the district? So
in our office, we have a great team. Aiden is kind of the gatekeeper. He's the person that answers the phone when somebody calls. And so he can be reached at 617-722-1494. And also email john.keenan@masenate.gov. We have a system in place that we try not to miss a single email in terms of responding. So if people have concerns about, whether they're not getting a response from a state agency on benefits or having anything, registry of motor vehicles, please reach out to us. Doreen is the district director and constituent services director, and she does remarkable work. And the range of things that she deals with is so incredibly broad, and she's really, really good at it. We've had people from other districts that call our office saying, hey, is Doreen there? And we say, okay, and where do you live? Do I have to give my address? And ultimately Doreen will get it. She'll say, oh, the person's outside the district. And then we coordinate with the other offices on it. But her reputation is great, and so is everybody in the office. So we do that. That's a big thing. So if anybody has any issue at all regarding state government, if they want to express an opinion, I urge them to send us an email or a telephone call. We read them, and we have a system in the office where I see them as they come in. There's a draft done. I redline the draft, and out it goes. And that's, for instance, what I spent this morning on, was personally responding to emails. And so we encourage people to reach out to us.
Anything we haven't touched upon as we get ready to close out our conversation, but you want to make sure that you mention as we say goodbye?
No, just we're going to keep working. We're in the legislative session. We'll get committee assignments soon. All the bills that have been filed will have hearings, and so if people are interested in contacting us about a particular bill, please do it, and we can then get word out as to when the hearing date is, and people have the opportunity to participate remotely at a legislative hearing. So we urge people to do that. Keep us on our toes. It's more important than ever. And We're in a process now of doing our Senate rules and our joint rules, which we'll do next week, and we're trying to make those such that we are more open, transparent, and participatory as a state Senate, and that's been a priority of mine throughout my term, but with the rules coming up, we've been really pushing that the last few weeks.
Would love to have you back in once the Senate puts theirs out. Usually you're in quarterly to kind of touch base with us as to what's going on. So we appreciate the partnership that we have between the studio, the community, and you and your office.
Same here. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We want to thank you for tuning in to a program like Community Chat. Again, as I said at the beginning of the program, you have an idea for a conversation, maybe you might want to be a guest host. info@abingtoncam.tv. That's the way to get the ball rolling. And until our next conversation, have a great day.